Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Biz Dev Podcast, the podcast about developing your business. I'm David Baxter, your host, and I am joined today by the latest in the victims of the tech layoffs, Gary Voigt. How's it going, man?
This is the first I'm hearing of this.
It's the first time I've told you. Oh, I'm sorry. This is our last
Should we be
episode
doing
together,
this in the
Gary.
podcast, or do I need like an exit interview? What do I
No,
do?
I mean, it's this is your exit interview. It's been real. Have a good one. See you later.
All right, guys. It's been fun.
I'm just kidding. I love Gary. He's not going anywhere. We are also joined by a special guest, David A. Smith. He is the CTO of the Croquet Corporation. We're going to dive into all that good stuff. This is going to be a really cool episode. But first, I want to dive in, continue our series on time management. This is something we've been talking about. People who are in leadership roles, time management kind of is different. It's not quite the same as most people because your job often is to give away your job. And therefore, your time is managed differently because you've got to fill that sometimes. But also, you don't have deliverables like a lot of people do when you're in a leadership role because your job is to lead people rather than to deliver the widgets and doodads. So how does time management work for you, David?
It's not me. Terribly. I find my days, Mondays are the worst, obviously, because I meet with my entire team. It's literally wall-to-wall meetings. But the most valuable thing I find is having time to not do anything. It actually is the one place where I think by not doing anything, I get the most work done. It's the things like planning, solving problems. So really, that sort of taking time for yourself, it's weird, but if you don't do that, you're really squandering a huge opportunity. I think that's one of the most essential aspects of the way I need to work. And I don't do it enough, I think. And I think as a whole, the business suffers. I don't think anybody does it enough.
So I believe very strongly in the concept of what's margins. We're called margins, where it's if I have a meeting, I don't like to go back to back. I like to leave some wiggle room, either for the meeting to go over, or more importantly, to allow what I would call the serendipity of life to get in the way. When you're the leader, some of the best I have found the best times and the most productive times are when I had nothing planned and something falls in my lap. Someone, hey, man, I'm having a bad day. I need you to talk to me. Or a client calls out of nowhere. And if I had had a meeting, I would have had to miss that call. Do you find that to be a similar thing?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, the good idea and what I try to do, not I can't always do it, but try to schedule a half-hour meeting with an hour. That gives you that extra flexibility, but also it gives you that break if it happens to go shorter. So you really,
Mm-hmm.
so you're on the one hand able to get some time for yourself, but also prep for the next meeting, which is always good to do. Sort of thinking about it's always a context shift, right? I'm going from talking about this idea to another. So I think that's been that's a very useful rule of thumb.
Do you use anything? Are you old school and you're using hand calendars? You using apps? How do you manage your physical time?
It's almost all Google Calendar these days,
Mm-hmm.
which is it's nice because everybody else can see my calendar. That's one of the big challenges that any organization has is finding time on somebody else's very scarce resource, and Google Docs, I mean Google Calendar actually it's very useful for that. It's not great. There's nothing out there that I've seen that's great, but the fact that I can see where everybody else is, and I can see, and more importantly, they can see where I am. That's really really valuable. I know there's some tools like Calendly that give you kind of a global perspective, so you can have people invite and choose a time that's free. Those are scary though, because they also fill up every bit of time that you have. It's so much better to have kind of a little more control of it and a little more thought to about whether you want to have that meeting at a particular time.
I love finding out how people manage their time because I find everybody struggles with it.
Hmm.
And but it's not talked about a lot. So that's why we've been kind of doing a series. You're the fourth in a row that we have asked this question to, and almost everyone admits they're not great at it, and they wish they could be better. So we had this one guest previously that was talking about they would schedule their whole week, like during the weekend, and they would go the whole week and pencil it all out. Of course, they would be changes and stuff, but they were super, super organized. And I do not have that bone in my body. That just does not work. My wife could do it, but not me. But I was super impressed by that.
David, I have a question for you. Besides just big meetings and things on Mondays, throughout the week, you said it's kind of flexible, but I'm sure there's still small tasks that you have to take care of during those days. So do you have anything besides Google Calendar that you use? Like I know I use like a little field notes booklet, just pen and paper, and draw little check boxes for like 3 main things that I got to get done that day. Do you use any kind of analog tools as well, or is it just strictly Google Calendar?
For meetings, if it isn't on Google Calendar, I'll lose it, honestly.
Oh, okay.
I do kind of a checkbox thing, just kind of have a regular update on Mondays of things I have to get done during the week, but those are just have to get done by the end of the week. That's, by the way, sometimes why weekends were invented, so that you can finish all the stuff you didn't get done during the week. But
Been there.
yeah, I do a little bit of that because I mean, there's always we're all multitaskers. Especially with high tech. I mean, everything from solving some technical problem to engaging with a lot of it's lately writing papers, documents, white papers, that sort of thing. And those, kind of the way that marketing works today is the you write the document for the press, and then they take it and slice it up in the way they want. So you have to constantly be doing as much writing, more writing in a sense than other people are writing about you. And so somehow I got that job.
Nice.
Now, David, you're the CTO of Croquet Corporation, and we did a quick little dive into LinkedIn to see what the business is about. But why don't
Yeah,
you tell us a little bit about your business and give us an overview of what you do?
yeah. Croquet is this dream in a sense that we've had. I'm give you a little bit of history context because I think that's important. Um, many years ago, well, I'll go back a little even further because it's kind of interesting. I wrote the first real time 3D adventure shooter game many years ago called The Colony. That that was actually interesting. I actually did it because I was very interested in the idea of what 3D could be. This is actually before Castle Wolfenstein. It goes back that far, and it demonstrated, hey, 3D is really quite powerful. That led to a couple things. One is Jim Cameron was working on the movie The Abyss at the time, and it's got a pirated version of the game, and asked me to lay out the set so they could actually see what the set would look like. This is obviously way before Avatar. The sets they do today are pretty amazing.
Sure.
Um, so he could actually walk around on the set and see what was going to show up on the camera, and what the layout, kind of what the camera angles would be.
So you created like a virtual environment for James Cameron?
Yeah, that's right.
Sweet.
So
That is so cool.
that was like my second little gig with this 3D stuff. And that led to a
Little
product
gig.
called Artist Walkthrough, the first real-time 3D design tool for PCs and Macs. That won the first breakthrough product of the year from Mac User magazine when they were still around. But that became the standard in Hollywood for set design. I mean, literally everybody, every director and every set designer started using it. Tom Clancy got very interested in my game. This is going back in time a little bit. But then he said, I want to work with you. So he's my first outside investor. And he was also on my board for Virtus when I did Virtus Walkthrough. But he said, I want to do something with you. So he introduced me to the FBI hostage rescue team. And I started working with them. They took me on one of their training missions on what they call battle towns, big cinder block town. Nobody lives there, of course. And we're up on this platform looking down on this thing. And next thing we know, big black helicopters fly over our heads. Black clad ninjas come out onto the top of these buildings and they start blowing stuff up. And it was like, holy crap, I've never seen anything like this. So I called up Tom and said, hey, we got to do a game about these guys. I've never seen anything like this. Tom said, well, you do a game, I'll do the book. And that was Rainbow Six.
Oh,
Oh my
wow.
gosh. Dude, that's one of my favorite books of all time. And the original game was one of my favorite games of all time.
Brian Upton, who's my partner at Croquet, was the game designer for that. He also did Ghost Recon. But the reason I'm bringing it up is multiplayer was one of the key items that we wanted to do with that. And multiplayer in games is really hard. Most people don't do it. And there's good reason. It's like you have to have an expertise in back-end infrastructure. You have to know how to set up that. And the other part that's really hard is I call it the net code of the system, which is basically every game has to be wired together. It's like you kind of like, well, if I do this and then this wire goes to you and you do this and then you have the thing comes back to me and you have to worry about race conditions and it's very brittle. Systems break right there always. I mean, it's just the worst programming that people can do. And why one of the reasons multiplayer isn't on every single application. It's very, very hard. And the other part is, of course, it's expensive to manage your back end infrastructure. It's expensive to do all that. So I was interested still in is, hey, how do we make this real? And Alan said, hey, let's do the real thing. So I started this project. I inherited Alan's lab. Alan was, his team was part of Y Combinator Research. They were a peer group to OpenAI. And so when Sam Altman took OpenAI out as a freestanding business, he was CEO of Y Combinator and became CEO of OpenAI. Then he had been funding this group, and so they went and joined me. So we started Croquet Corporation, and we decided to build the real thing, and that's what we've been working on. We kind of went into a room for a number of years to build it because it's really an operating system, and we solved it. We figured it out. We made it really, really robust, and we're just beginning to roll it out in a lot of ways. But we see this as a foundational element, what people are calling the metaverse today. To me, the metaverse is primarily a communication technology, communication platform. And that means that if I do something, it's essential you see me do it. And if you do something, I see that. And any kind of simulation that we're sharing has to evolve in exactly the same way. Think of it as a shared truth. It's like if what I say to you doesn't get communicated, you misunderstand it, then it's not working. And so when you're talking about particular virtual interactions like this, for me to do something and then you to see that as I do it means that we're communicating. I know that you see what I'm doing. I know you understand what I'm talking about. In particular, what you want, and this is obviously very timely, is you really want an AI as part of that conversation. So when you say something, AI says, "Oh, I'll get that. I'll make one of those for you." And generates that simulation between us. And now we can poke at it and say, oh, we didn't mean that, try this. And so it's a sort of a three-way conversation, human to computer to human. So that's kind of the story of how we got to here, and why we created Croquet, because we want people to be able to actually have much higher quality interactions, engagements than what's possible today. You've probably heard of things like CRDT and operational transform, which are things like Google Docs uses. Problem with those are eventual consistency models. They're like you have a database and use a shared database, and at some point they'll be the same, and that's okay when you're typing a letter, and you're running at 60 or 120 hertz, it ain't okay anymore. It has to be instantaneously updated, and I have to know and see what happened with you. And it can't be those rollback things where it kind of happened, but no, it really didn't happen. It has to always be moving forward. And it's kind of we call it virtual reality. One of the things to keep in mind is virtual reality and physical reality are going to merge over the next few years. So it's just reality. And so the virtual has to be as live and engaging and as perfect as the physical. So that's why we built the system, and that's kind of why we started Croquet. So long answer, but it's kind of fun.
That's an incredible backstory.
Yeah, you win.
Yeah.
I can't say anything more interesting than what you just said. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. I mean, I'm a gamer, been a gamer my whole life. So you are right in my wheelhouse in terms of things I enjoy. But you're explaining Croquet, and I'm imagining Fortnite, right? When me and you are playing, we're not in the same room, we're across the country. I move, you see me move in real time. You see me pick this thing up, you see me shoot it. What is the difference between that, which has been around for a while,
That's
and
right.
what you're describing as the next generation?
I think it's I describe it as sort of the vocabulary of gameplay. Traditional games uh, have a very limited vocabulary. You can move, you can shoot, you can kill, or you can die, depending on how good you are. It's a little bit more than that, maybe, but not a whole lot more than that is what we usually get. And that's actually pretty easy to manage with like a server infrastructure where truth exists up there. But when you want to increase the vocabulary, when I'd say we want interactive physics, where the physics actually, I see this block comes down, or actually 1,000 blocks are coming, and they're all coming perfectly synchronized. I see exactly all the same things that you see, or you pick up something and throw it, and it spins in exactly the same way. That's not doable in traditional architectures. Usually, when we have multi-user physics, it's really kind of sugar to the scene. It isn't something it may still be you blow up and you're dead, but it's kind of that's how to think about it. You don't have very fine interactions, and when we start talking about like imagine wearing glasses like this, and I'm talking to you, and I've got this simulation of a wing, and I'm modifying the Reynolds numbers, and I've got the wind tunnels going through here. It's like that requires a much higher quality of engagement than what you're going to get with a traditional model of gameplay. And not to say there's anything wrong with that, because it's very, very fun, but there's a reason. There's actually many reasons we focus on shooters in multiplayer games. First of all, they're fun. That's the most important thing about a game. But the second is we know how to do that. We going into much more rich interactions tends to be far more complicated, especially when you're doing real-time interactions. So that's kind of the big difference is I see is the vocabulary of a replicated computation model like we did is infinite. Anything you can imagine, you can have and modify and engage with. And I think that's a crucial part of what the future needs. It's like I said, I go back to what I said earlier. This idea of I'm communicating complexity to you, and that's essential for the future. We're going to be using these technologies to solve very, very hard problems. You can't solve very, very hard problems. You can't simulate those with with traditional game engines. So that's kind of what it's about.
So if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, you are such an interesting way to look at video games. The verbs that you're talking about. You can shoot, die, jump, whatever. You might
Yeah,
have 20. You're
yeah,
saying something like emergent gameplay, where I am setting, this is physics, and I'm
yeah,
putting real physics in my game. And if you push that box, I'm not telling you what's going to happen. Physics is going to, and we have
exactly,
to respond to that in real time.
And it's going to happen to every player in that environment the same way. Yeah.
exactly right.
And you don't necessarily know what I'm going to do with that. I might decide to break the box, but that's not a verb that you calculated. It's physics. They pushed enough force on said box that it broke the stuff. Is
Exactly
that
right. And in fact,
so
I show
interesting?
you a demo of not of breaking of the box, but all of that. Here's another weird part. So you imagine you have a fountain of cubes or something, or cubes and spheres. So one of the things we also have is replicated random. So when you do these things, it's random. We use random in games all the time, right? Everywhere, because that makes it feel real. But if you have a replicated random, that means I say, well, is it going to be a cube or a sphere we generate? It doesn't matter. It's going to be random. It's one or the other. And then what color is it? Again, it's random. But the randoms are bit identical replicated. I don't know what it's going to be. You don't either. But when it gets generated, I'm going to have the same color sphere or same color cube without having to communicate any of that information. So if you were to do that with a traditional approach, the server does all this stuff and says, hey, I did all this, then you're spending all your time streaming huge amounts of bandwidth to update. And remember, you're trying to do this at 60 hertz or whatever. Good luck. That's not going to happen. So so really, as soon as you have this replicated computation model, then all of a sudden, all the complexity of things, or the emergent complexity, goes way up, and things get very, very interesting. And the fact that they're fully interactive, even though it's running as like this physics engine with 1,000 boxes and things flying all around, and I can push at them, or kind of, or they'll run away from me or whatever. All of them That is what we're talking about. And I don't have to tell you. All I'm telling you is, hey, I moved over here. And that event then triggers all the bots are going to run away from me from this location, but not on just my machine, but on yours. And so every one of those, one of the demos I have is 5,000 bots running around inside of it, all perfectly synchronized. They're doing the same A-star AI. And so they're all doing the exact same thing. And then when I walk and start following them, they run away in exactly the same way. And so, for example, you have two PCs side by side, and you see them exactly the same location, but no communication outside of the fact that I moved from here to here. That's
Hmm.
what I'm talking about.
So at the end of the day, is Croquet a research company? Are you a gaming company? What is it that you're ultimately trying to make?
I'll go back to what I said earlier, which is, I think, true. It's sort of a missing protocol of the internet. And in this case, what we did was we have a kind of server that this uses. So when I'm interacting with you, it doesn't go direct, it goes via what we call a reflector. Reflector doesn't have any application state. All it does is uh, it um, it forwards the message to all the other participants and back to you. So it adds a timestamp to that, which is basically so you're kind of moving the clock of the system into these reflectors, and they're worldwide, but they have no state. So that means you can have as many as you want, and that also means you can have them very, very close. Our goal is to have sub 15 millisecond latency and the kind of application you can build. So far, we've been focusing on web apps, and we have a new product called Web Showcase, which allows you to embed a 3D world into your own website. But it includes things like Dolby Spatial Sound. But there's things like PDFs you can view and scroll through, and playing synchronized videos, that sort of thing. But that's just a start. One of the things that you'll see later this year, which we're pretty excited about, is fixing a big problem in the game space. And I'm kind of going full circle. Um, uh, we've actually figured out finally how to get game engines like Unity to be able to do this kind of thing in a game. And that's probably the most exciting thing I've seen in a while because we're talking about unlocking the way you can create applications of any sort, but I think games are probably going to be the first place where it really makes a big difference.
So it's more of the advanced technology that's the actual
Yeah,
product that
but
is being
it's
created.
two things. Actually, one is, as I said earlier, you go to App Store and there's very, very few games that are multiplayer, even though 70% of people want multiplayer games. It's just like that. It's where the center of massive gaming is. But the problem is it's very, very hard to write multiplayer games. As they're going back, you have to do the back end infrastructure and then you have to wire it up. My opinion is 99% of developers should not be doing that wiring. They should not be doing that back end. It's very specialized, it's very complex. So what we do is when you write a Croquet app, it's like writing a single user app. They just say it's a what's called a model view architecture. The model is that replicated state, and that we guarantee that whatever is inside their computing is exactly the same on everybody's system. So when you write that and you share it, then everybody has that same experience and they have the same interaction and the same view. But it's like writing a single user application. You don't have to worry about the wiring anymore. And that's such a huge win. The rule of thumb is multiplayer apps, particularly multiplayer games, are 3 times the level of effort and cost, which is one of the reasons you don't see them on the App Store much over a single user app. So if you can make a multi-user app the same level of complexity in terms of the writing as a single user app, but get all this additional benefit, this really deep collaboration, this very deep complexity, but without having to kill yourself trying to do it, without having to, raise the cost of the development time and price cost by 3 times, then you change the paradigm. So that's why I'm excited right now. And so what we do is that we sell time on our network.
Okay, so you're not building like the next Unity or Unreal.
No, our stuff would
Okay.
work with that. I mean,
So okay, so it's a layer because
years of technology in there. There's no way. nor would you want to replace it. It's actually pretty good. I like, by the way, we also love web technologies. 3JS is our favorite rendering on that side.
So like Unreal in those, I know in particular Epic, who's another local company,
Mhm.
they have been giving away, if you use Unreal, you get Fortnite's network code, which of course is the most battle tested network code on the planet.
Yep.
So, I mean, they're giving a lot of that away as part of their engines. Now you're saying, hey, they should use you instead?
It depends on what the game is. If you want to
Okay.
play, if you want to create a Fortnite clone, use that.
Sure.
I mean,
But if you're wanting something with more realistic physics and that kind of thing,
yeah,
that's where you're going to be
that's right.
stronger.
That's right.
Okay.
And by the way, you still have to pay back for the back end infrastructure, and we'd probably cheaper there anyway. And I think that's really probably the right answer to me is like, expand the scope of what's possible, and it's still cheaper. Even if you decide to take the Fortnite engine and you want to add anything to it, this is where I get to the brittle part. This stuff is really hard to extend. It's like add a new feature. That's going to take days and months to get right, and be nice if you didn't have to worry about that. Particularly when you want to add lots and lots of interactive capabilities, a lot of kinds of complexity to that.
So, are there any games or applications on the market that are using you guys behind the scenes, or are you guys still in the nascent
Now
stages?
we are getting ready to. It's probably a month or two before you'll see the very very first version available to developers of
Okay.
this new thing. It's pretty new. We tried to do it a while back, and we just couldn't figure it out. And this time, number of technology changes have occurred. Everything from uh, the way the web infrastructure is built, and a few other things that made it very very complicated for us to actually quite doable. And what that means, by the way, is from a developer's perspective, they're not going to see any of the complexity we had to deal with. It's all taken care of, and that was kind of the key thing. And it was really just it was very, very exciting to see this come to life. But on the other side, on the web side of things, we're completely out there. We've got 1,000 developers, I think now, who are building applications, web-based apps on top of our platform. A number have deployed it. We're working with some very large companies working on digital twin infrastructure, because that's the other thing that you can do with the system is pipe live data into it and graph it, visualize it. For example, live data centers, big power systems. There's a number of applications out there where having this live data and live interaction, and particular having a shared view of that information is essential. And the web browser is pretty nice because there's no friction. So if I need to join you, I just open up my phone and go to a URL. I'm instantly there without any downloads.
So, the real question I have for you is, can you give Horizon Worlds legs? That's what I want to know.
Good question. It's sort
Man,
of a
because that seems to be, I mean, Facebook, or excuse me, Meta has spent tens of billions of dollars and they can't put feet on these people. Can,
well.
if they were using you guys, would they have feet?
I'm not sure that would solve that problem. Although it was interesting, I won't say too much, but let's just say we've hired a few people from that direction, and for a very good reason. I think that what we're doing doesn't solve that problem, but solves some of the others that I think are root.
Yeah, there might be some people available from the tech space in San
Yeah, I mean, they
Francisco.
just laid off a few. Maybe you guys can pick up some bargains. Well, it's so interesting to me because, I mean, I don't want to downplay it. I mean, I have dabbled in game development, so I know like the word, A-star pathfinding. I get that term, but I am certainly not a game dev, but I have always wanted to be. So, but clearly there's something really difficult because I mean, Meta and those people, they're smart people. They're running one of the most complicated websites in the world. They've been doing it for a long time. They do it well. So clearly there's something very hard about metaverse and a world that you can live in that can react the way that they want, because they're throwing almost unlimited amounts of money at it. And yet you go into Horizon Worlds, if you've ever put on a quest and gone into that, it looks like something from 10 years ago, if that.
There you
And you're
go.
like, There you go. So, you have the pro. Nice.
Yeah.
But
Actually,
so I'm going
I'll tell you what the problem is, and it's interesting. And I'll give you another historical context. So the team at Xerox PARC that created Alto and kind of defined the entire scope of the future we live in. You know, when you look at overlapping windows, Alan invented that in the shower. Pop-up menus, Dan Ingalls. That was a group of 25 people. The initial group that created almost everything you use on your phone or your PC. When you look at icons, it came out of that. 25 people. The original Macintosh team was 25 people. So, by the way, it has to be the right 25 people. I'm not saying,
of course.
oh, this is a bunch of people. When you create a big infrastructure and you spend billions of dollars to do it, the problem is you don't have a center. You don't have the group that owns it. I mean, Carmack just left for a very good reason. Can you imagine Carmack being frustrated? Why? Because he couldn't get done what needed to get done.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, I
so
mean, that's a huge blow because
that's
he's
right.
like the guy.
Yeah. And he was the right guy. So when you have a situation where you're trying to farm out the parts to lots and lots of people, and you have middle management job to sort of like, oh yeah, we're doing this, and it's all competitive without trying to find that center. This is, I think, a big problem of big organizations today. That's how they do everything. I have a friend at, let's just say, people building operating systems it usually fails unless you have a center to that. You have somebody who owns it completely. This is written about, by the way, by Fred Brooks in a book called Mythical Man Month. Fred was the architect of the IBM 360, not just the hardware, but the software too. And so he describes this problem where you have to have is somebody who owns it all the way, owns every aspect of it, and is able to manage that and ensure that everything flows in the right way. Having big organizations throw lots of people at a system without having clarity and understanding of what the final goal is, and making it too big, it's like, oh, we'll just hire another person to do that. You get you flatten out the system, and you don't have that intensity of the center gets lost. So there have been hugely successful projects that changed the world, but they're almost always small. And like now the Macintosh grew from that kernel, right? It grew fast because then you had marketing and all those other things. You have to build apps, but they all started in that way, and they all made kind of a final working system up and down. They solved those hard problems. So yeah, and that's one of the reasons I think we've been successful in doing this. We're a very small team, and for somebody to go say, "Oh, well, we could do that," maybe they could, but chances are that they won't succeed. And by the way, this is I think these organizations don't know how to do this anymore. But the value of small startups is why. I mean, we do those things. We're the ones that build these very, very, very hard things to accomplish. Remember, Google started out in a closet.
Yeah, it seems like smaller
Time.
startups pave the way for, more groundbreaking tech and
And they
better
haven't really
improved tech.
changed much since, right? They got the page rank thing, and now they've made it smarter. And of course, they're adding AI today, but the reality is still pretty much the same thing. The big transition was when they said, "Oh, we're an ads business."
Mm-hmm.
But even that, they bought a small company that had started out as tiny, and then they
double click.
So that's
double
the
click.
that's the right model, and that's why they'll never have legs.
Too big, too many people, too many. I love that. So I'm going to take a hard turn because for the sake of time, I want to be respectful of your time. We have done this podcast very differently than normal because I am just totally nerding out here. And so I haven't asked any of my normal questions because this is just so fascinating to me. But I'm going to finish up with the way that we always finish, which is to ask you, if you were running into someone, whether they're in your industry or not, and they had big ideas, what would be your top 3 pieces of advice for that new founder / technologist, whatever you want, however you want to categorize them?
That's a good question, and obviously I'll probably give you a little bit of a different kind of answer. First thing is, if your idea is important, not just to you but to others, you sort of, I always say, if you have an ability to achieve something and you have an opportunity to do it, then you have an obligation to make it real. And I think that somebody with a big idea, and by definition valuable, has an obligation to make it happen. And
Hmm.
the thing I've learned over time is that you're not done until you say you're done. In other words, you don't give up. And there's no reason to give up. If the thing is real and important, then there's always a path forward. And so I think that's that's probably the most important um, thing I've learned. Um, the Another thing though is I kind of think there's two kinds of businesses. Peter Thiel talks about the 0 to 1, which I really love the idea of, but unfortunately, I think that that's not how the real world works. Most people take 0.95 to 1. In other words, they take a technology that's pretty much complete and they say, oh, let's vector it slightly into this market. We see that all the time. I mean, it's like, I sort of think that's Y Combinator's thesis, right? Do something like this over here. And so there's no technological implications, no, moving the world forward. It's just like, but it makes money. I don't want to take away from that. Their job is to invest in people where pretty close to a sure thing. The other kinds of businesses are the true 0s to 1. Examples are Google, where they went, there's idea of a search engine. There wasn't really a search engine. We had, if you remember, Yahoo, which actually wound up using Google for a while, and that's how Google got their start. But this idea of a true search engine, in fact, how I discovered Google was I had to decide, oh, you could use everybody who links to you as the value of the page. And so I literally started looking for, does anybody do this already? Because this is a big idea. And then I found Google and no one was using Google, which is amazing. I said, oh, you got to check this out, because I felt two things. One was elation that it worked. Two was depression because they got there before me. But that's a true 0 to 1.
Hmm.
And I think the 0 to 1s, there's not enough of those. I mean, I think we're a 0 to 1 because it's like, when you talk about a missing protocol of the internet, it's pretty big balls. But it's
Yes. Yeah.
important.
It's a big
It's
claim.
important
Yeah.
to be there. So those are the things. If you have a 0 to 1, you have to go and do it. That's where the obligation comes. Um, I don't. You had another question, and I don't remember what it was.
Was number 3. So you've given 2. Would you have a third?
A third in my life, um, you need friends. That anybody, there's no self-made men. There's people there's people out there who are willing to help you. It might be advice, it might be money, it might be all kinds of things, but um, you need friends, and you need them as soon as you have that idea. If no other reason for somebody to tell you stop, that's not a good idea. I mean, you still have to make up your own mind about it, but you need other people always. Um, there's a truth there that has to be found, and other people are often the places where you find that truth. And the other thing is, no one knows how to do any of this stuff, but all of us do.
Man, I love that. I love that. I could talk to you for days.
Yeah, it kind of
But
stinks
I
that we
know.
don't have much more time because
Yeah,
I
I
still had a bunch
appreciate
of
this so much.
questions. This has been such an interesting interview. I have to say, this has been amazing to listen to you.
I just put our playbook down because I'm just going to listen. This is just
Yeah.
this is
And
so much
I
fun.
got to say, this is for real. For David Smith, our guest, to understand this, this is the first time I saw David, our host, leaning into the camera to listen to you talk about what you were saying.
That
It was
does
the first
not
time.
mean that our other guests are not interesting. Let me
Oh,
be clear. They're all very, very great. But no, this is right in my nerd house. Yeah, this was great. I mean, you're bringing up all the names and all the people that I've admired for so long that it's very cool to talk to you. If there's some way that someone wants to learn about croquet, what would they do? Where would they go?
Croquet.io is our website. And in fact, when you go there, there's actually a working 3D world. You can wander around inside there, and you can actually invite other people into that world to share with you. It's got Dolby sound, it's got a bunch of stuff in there. That's a very simple little world, but it demonstrates what's possible right now. If you go into there's a number of more interesting spaces for you to explore. It's a full development system, so the documentation, you can try things out. Also, we've got a number of video demonstrations and things like that. But it's worth it's worth checking it out, and more importantly, if you're a developer playing with it, I think you'd have a lot of fun with that. And it's been quite a journey. It's been exciting to see people pick these things up. It's early days, but this is the way the world's going to work. This is the way computers were meant to be, and it's really very nice to be able to see at least some of these ideas get out there.
Very cool. Now, I know I went to the website and I only briefly kind of moved around inside that little virtual world right there on the homepage, and it is very cool. It was very smooth. In fact, I didn't think it was, I thought it was just kind of like a demo that you were sliding around. I didn't think it was active just because it was very smooth, but
Real.
I'm going to have to spend
Yeah,
some
and
more
then
time in there.
yeah, invite other people, and what's so cool is everything's synchronized inside there. We're going to add more toys and things to that, but you can actually take that. There's a way to put one of those worlds onto your own website, put your own content in there, your own PDFs, videos, whatever you like. It's
Very
pretty
cool.
cool.
All right, so that's
Pretty amazing.
croquet.io to reach out. And if you want to reach out to David, he's also on LinkedIn. We'll put both of those links in our show notes, and you could find
Yeah,
those underneath this
and go
episode.
croquet on Twitter.
All right.
Okay, there we go.
And if anybody has any questions or comments for us, you can drop them right below this video in the comments area, or you can send us an email at hello@thebigpixel.net, or reach out to us on any of our social media channels.
All
This
right.
is fun. Thank you so much. I really had a good time.
This was awesome.
I love this so much. Thank you. I appreciate your time very much, and we'll be done for this week, but we will see everybody next week. Thanks again.
See you guys.